few weeks ago, I went and saw Cats 2019. And to be honest, it's one of the most haunting experiences of my life. This movie has me wishing I was the chosen cat to be reborn, and my ideal life would be forgetting I ever saw this. Now, in all fairness to this, I've never been a huge fan of Cats the musical to begin with. The stage production has always come off as a little too terrifying and a little too uncanny for me. I've never really enjoyed the music. There's too many characters to really remember or name. There's really no plot, and I just found it always just generally kind of nightmarish. In concept, I don't hate the idea of Cats the musical. I think it's a kind of fun idea. I do wish maybe the story had a little bit more structure. I do wish the songs had a little more, whatever to them. But overall, I've just never really loved Cats. As far as Andrew Lloyd Webber plays go, this is really not the one for me. However, though, I don't think it's an inherently bad show. Hell, it was the longest running show on Broadway for a very long time, running for an 18 consecutive years. That's pretty impressive. Even after all the awful songs and the weird names and just kind of the nightmarish visuals, when you're watching a stage production, generally you have a much higher level to be able to suspend your disbelief. You're able to accept more. There's just something about the medium of theater that really allows us to let go all of our disbelief and just really absorb what we're watching. So when I'm watching a stage production, I can accept how the cats look, even though I don't think they look very great. I can accept the lack of a structure because, generally it's entertaining to watch, even if the songs are annoying. And to be honest, most people don't really enjoy Cats for the story or for the music, but rather they're more interested in the very in depth and very visually stunning, to put it nicely, I guess, costumes, as well as the beautiful choreographed dance sequences. Despite all of this, though, I did go into Cats 2019 excited, to say the least. I guess that's a word I could use to describe how I felt. And now, let me give you some just general background knowledge for Cats. Cats was produced in 1981 and is a play by Andrew Lloyd Webber that was adapted from a book of poems by T.S. Eliot called Old Possum's Books of Practical Cats. And some of the other cats and songs do come from some unpublished poems as well. There really isn't a structure to the story and the overall narrative because so much of the story is just adapted from these very nonsensical, almost kind of childish poems about these cats and their weird names and the weird things that they do. And somehow this, like I said, was the longest show on Broadway until Phantom of the Opera took that title, which has now been running for 32 years. Oddly enough, also by Andrew Lloyd Webber. And Andrew Lloyd Webber is interesting to say the least. Kim from For Harriet, another YouTube channel on here, actually tweeted that she thought that he was a charlatan. And honestly, I don't fully disagree. Other than Phantom of the Opera, I'm not a really huge Lloyd Webber fan. I will admit, Don't Cry for Me Argentina from Evita is on my top 25 most played. But I'm not really a huge fan of the show, though I do think it does pull on some heartstrings, even if it is arguably not the most historically accurate depiction. As well as I do enjoy Jesus Christ Superstar, but I will say the songs aren't the best, but I do like the concept of a pop rock opera about Jesus Christ. Overall, I feel like Weber has somehow tricked us all into thinking he's some kind of genius, which I must give it to him. Phantom is genius. And I'm not going to say Cats is the worst thing that's ever happened to Broadway. As much as I'm not a huge fan of it, I do recognize that there is a lot to enjoy about it. It's just not my cup of tea. Weber, though, is known for playing a generally significant role in the production when his plays become films. I'm not sure to what role he played in Cats, but I do know he had his hand somehow in it. I haven't watched too much of the behind the scenes, but from what I see, he's generally there a lot. And from what I know from the 2004 adaptation of Phantom of the Opera, he helped choose the director, meaning he saw how awful of a director Joel Schumacher was and still picked him. So what I'm saying is Andrew Lloyd Webber is good at musicals, but is trash when it comes to being consulted on his adaptations of his plays. But speaking of directors, this movie was directed by Tom Hooper. Hooper has had a few films under his belt that have been highly praised, as well as a few that have caused some controversy. Hooper was the director by 2012's adaptation of Les Mis. And while I don't hate that film adaptation, I actually enjoyed lots about it, I cannot deny that it has some glaring issues, much like Cats. Cooper had this idea for Les Mis, and that was to have the actors sing the musical numbers live while recording. If you aren't aware, generally in film musicals, the cast will record the songs months before filming has even started, meaning they do the recording of the songs generally before maybe the script has been finalized, before the characters and cast have really began to create any dynamic or even any chemistry with each other. This often coupled with the fact that most movie actors aren't trained in stage performance. Musical movies often feel like a shadow of their stage production, to put it nicely. One criticism I often have, and hear some others have, is that the musical numbers in these movies don't always feel super organic. They often lack a lot of the emotion that drives behind it. And like I said, this really just goes back to the main issue that it's before there's a lot of test screening and chemistry building, as well as sometimes the script isn't finalized. And even if you are familiar with what the musical is, you aren't sure what the film might do because it's not uncommon for movie adaptations to make big changes, especially to the plot in character relationships. This is because in a stage play, once again, we're able to suspend our disbelief and accept that, Meg and Christine are friends and that Raoul and Christine are old lovers. We don't need a lot of dialogue and exposition and scenes to build up on that. While in a movie, you kind of do need that, which is something, Phantom of the Opera film adaptation did. And I think because they made so many changes, there were some interesting choices when it came to their recordings of their voices. Part of the problem with movie actors not be really trained the same way stage actors are, which is a big thing actually in American acting. And the huge issue is that in stage acting, actors have to be able to have a full range of their vocals no matter what emotion you're singing or what you're portraying. There's a reason when actors are whispering on stage, they're not actually whispering. They do other things with their voice and the way they're posturing to visualize and to communicate to the audience that they're whispering. They can't actually whisper because it's not going to translate well. While in film, you can. There's just different, obstacles for each medium. And because of this, a lot of movie actors don't really have the ability to, I guess, show a certain range of emotion while singing. They just aren't trained in it. It's not that they're bad actors, it's that they're just trained in a completely different form. And I think this is very evident in Hooper's Les Mis, even though they were shooting live vocals in a way to try to capture that movie essence, it kind of became a detriment, though, to the film. As great as Anne Hathaway is, when she sings I Dreamed a Dream, she doesn't have the training to be able to sing while conveying her emotions. The song gets very muddled in her pretty amazing acting, but because of that, the song suffers. That's actually one of the songs on the soundtrack where you can barely hear her. I No offense to Anne Hathaway, I think she's amazing, and I think she did fine with the role. I just think once again it's the detriment of this kind of movie to film adaptation, as well as Hooper had this weird idea which in principle sounded cool but didn't really work. Now, don't get me wrong, there were some actors in the mix that were stage trained. Those including Hugh Jackman as John Valjean and Samantha Barks as Eponine. These two actors, like I said, are trained stage production as well as they have been in many stage productions. Barks even played Eponine on stage prior to taking this role in the film. And I do feel bad because Sacha Baron Cohen is trained in stage and musical theater, but for some reason he was not good in this movie. Him and Helena Bonham Carter, whenever they sing, I have no idea what they're doing or saying or what they're even doing there. It was odd. And like I said, Hooper had this great idea. He noticed that because a lot of the time vocals are recorded prior to filming, that there's just like a emotional and just kind of also natural dissonance that's happening there. It doesn't feel as organic. It's sometimes a little harder to believe. I definitely think it's because of, musical movies that kind of came that joke about how odd musicals can be sometimes. So I think he had this good idea, but it was badly executed. And I do think part of the problem is here, at least in America, a lot of our actors are not trained properly in how to do both stage and film. This is very, very different than in the UK, where a lot of those actors are trained for stage and film. And like I said, they're kind of totally different, but they can definitely, in this situation, kind of enhance each other. But speaking of great ideas with bad execution, Cats has the same issue in the sense that Cooper had an idea and it was bad, or at least badly executed, to give him some credit. So the cast of Cats had this pretty groundbreaking CGI fur texture that was created on to be used on top of them. This way they wouldn't be kind of having to run around long hours, be filming scenes in these like kind of heavy, smelly cat suits. So I understand what they were going for, as well as it was gonna hopefully create a more realistic. It's hard to say realistic when they're still cat people, but I guess more realistic texture and feel than using weird fur bits. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't hate this idea. But I was wondering what was wrong with how they looked. And upon some research, I found out that they didn't really wrap up the production aspect, the filming aspect of this movie until April of 2019, with the intentions to release this film for December. So the CGI kind of looks so nightmarish because it's not finished. They're even releasing a re-release of this already to films, or they'll have a more polished version still, not the complete version, because this is no way near ready. I do believe deep down that the CGI and animation in this movie could have been groundbreaking. It could have been what they wanted had they given themselves a whole year just to edit. I definitely don't know why they didn't push for a 2021 December release. I honestly feel like that should have been fine because I understand they want to release in December because that's right before the Oscars. You release a lot of movies in December, especially a lot of musicals. And that way they become relevant when it comes for Oscar and, the Golden Globes, all those fun things that you want awards for. I honestly believe if they'd given themselves at least another year, this could have looked less worse. The reason I say this is because it takes years sometimes multiple, sometimes decades to just do animated films. So the idea that they thought that they could put this pretty revolutionary texture on these dancers in less than a year is probably why it looks so bad. So once again, Hooper had this great idea, but it was an awful execution. Now, let's get into the movie itself. Cats is nightmare fueled, fever dreamish, but to its credit, I must say, it's pretty faithful to the source material. Now, that doesn't make it a good movie, however, I will say I don't think it's as bad as critic. Now, that doesn't make it a good movie. However, I don't think it's bad as some critics are really making it out to be. Still not great, but not as bad. You know, it's kind of like the difference between like a rotting and molding tomato between just a rotting tomato. Wow, whoever thought I would have said a rotting tomato is just slightly better than like the even less edible version. So a lot of the issues that Cats, the stage production has, the film adaptation has inherited. So I don't really feel like it's fair to overly critique the film on those issues because they stem from the source material. However, I will touch upon them, but I don't want to dwell too much on them because I'm more interested in looking at this film as itself and what it does wrong. It was obvious that director Hooper attempted to give the story some semblance of a structure. Because, like I said before, a big thing about Cats is that there really isn't a structure to it. There's kind of this thing where there's going on where there's these Jellicle cats, which is never really explained what that means. Going to a Jellicle ball, and at the Jellicle ball, their leader, Old Deuteronomy, will choose a cat to be reborn and given the life that they want. It's very beautiful in some ways, but also horrifying. And the reason I say there isn't really structure is because some cats that are introduced want to be reborn, some don't, and some you're just not sure what they want. Then they introduce kind of a villain, not really, and that's resolved within like 2 minutes. And then a cat is chosen. Like, there isn't really a structure. A lot of the characters introduced are very inconsequential in the sense that they disappear shortly after or completely. I'm telling you, this, I don't know why this was the longest running show, but you know, I guess it is what it is. But like I said, there was some attempts on Hooper's attempt to give it some kind of a structure. But the problem is, I thought there were times where it worked, and other times where it just made it more apparent that there isn't a structure. The stage play relies a lot on Munku Strap as our kind of like pseudo main character. I call him a pseudo main character because we don't really learn anything about him, his interests, his wants. He's just kind of there to bring us into the world of Cats. Which, once again, this kind of breaking of the fourth wall is fine in stage plays, but in movies, it's a little weird. Like, I know Deadpool does it well, but it's a joke. You're not supposed to take it serious. But here, you're supposed to take it serious. But they decided to just get rid of that whole idea together for this film and decide to make Victoria our main character. I did not hate this decision. It actually gave Victoria more of a real presence and kind of a semblance of a character arc. It also makes her moment when she actually is the one to kind of pick who gets reborn a lot more meaningful and less kind of weird. Spoilers. This is, I should have given a spoiler warning earlier. Lots of spoilers. But in the stage play and in the movie, a cat named Grizabella is chosen to be reborn. And in the stage play, Victoria, this pretty little white cat who's kind of like the symbol of innocence and purity, she reaches out and picks, or not really picks, but she accepts and leads the acceptance of Grizabella back into the Jellicle cat cult family thing. However, that's kind of it. She's in a nice few dance sequences, but like Victoria as a character, not really there. But in the movie, we get her and we go on a journey with her because the movie decides to build this kind of very thin veiled structure. Before getting any further, I will say if the structure or movie was a building, I would not lean against its walls in fear that it would tumble, because even in this attempt, it's still very thinly veiled and weak. But they decided that to make Victoria the main character. The movie starts with her being kind of tossed to the side by her owner. The Jellicle cats find her, Mongoose Drop being one of them, and kind of introduce her into the Jellicle world. And she kind of follows them on this weird night journey to the Jellicle Ball. That's kind of our thin veiled structure. It doesn't really work because the play still jumps so much around, and so does the movie. So the narrative is still very weak, but at least we have a character who has a character arc, I will say. It's a very weak one. Um, some semblance of a character arc that we follow and we kind of watch her grow and change throughout the movie. Not a lot, but it's kind of there. Some other issues with this kind of trying to make a plot out of this movie. So I'm just going to say the medium of film, I just feel like highlights it automatically that there isn't a plot. In a stage play, you can get away with a lot, 18 years worth of a lot, but in a movie theater, you just kind of pick up on it a little sooner. Another issue that kind of brings out this plotlessness is Jenny Anydot's song. It just feels so divorced from the story and the very thin veiled narrative. But then they try to attach it by having Mongoose Drop explicitly state that Jenny Anydots wants to be born. But not only does it make it more obvious that how much her song does not relate to her want to be reborn, it just makes it more obvious that we're just kind of like wasting time, it feels like. And the same goes for Bustopher Jones and Skimbleshanks the Railway Cat. The songs just feel so out of place, so not related to the plot, and in an attempt to make it related just doesn't work. I will say I feel like the most egregious would be Skimbleshank's song, and the only reason I say that is I guess you could argue that they tried to make Jenny Anydots and Bustopher Jones song, kind of more related to world building and how these cats operate. Okay, I can maybe accept that argument. I would not make it myself, but I'll not say it's a bad argument. But Skimbleshank's song is in like the middle of the part of the story where we're at the Jellicle Ball. Cats who are there, who are performing, are there to perform with the attempt of being reborn. And he has this song about working on a railroad, and it doesn't seem that sad. It doesn't seem that upsetting. So you're like, so does he want to be reborn, or does he just want whoever is reborn to consider being a railway cat? I just don't know. So there's another thing they add that they try to add to make it feel like an actual story with a plot and a conflict, is that they make Macavity into an actual villain. It wasn't good. But Macavity spends the whole movie abducting other cats in an attempt to weed out the competition of the cats who are looking for a new life. Essentially, Jenny Anydot sings and eats a cockroach and then is whisked away. Bustopher Jones sings about being fat and liking to eat and then is whisked away. Gus the theater cat also sings his song about being a theater cat and is whisked away. And then Skimbleshanks also. It's just very strange. Macavity in the play isn't really a villain. He shows up like once. I feel like maybe in an attempt to justify hiring some pretty big name actors to play a pretty small role, they expanded this role and gave him more of a villainous role to maybe justify why he's doing the things he's doing. And I didn't hate it, but it didn't really work. It was just kind of strange. And it once again felt like one of those things that they were just including to try to add a plot. Like I said, none of these, in my opinion, really work. They just kind of highlight how much this story doesn't have a plot. It's almost like band-aids. They're trying to put some band-aids to hide the boo-boos. Now, let's talk about the music. Like I said, I've never been a huge fan of the music in this play. And I'm gonna say, despite Memory and Mr. Mistopheles' song, music, I just don't. I hate it. I don't like it. Same for the movie. This movie did include some new additions, one of them being Taylor Swift's Beautiful Ghosts. And I wouldn't say it's a bad song, and it feels close enough that you can almost think it belongs, but there's something about it that almost feels. It just doesn't. And I think the issue is that song is definitely written in more of a contemporary kind of like verse, chorus, verse um, structure, while a lot of the songs in Cats doesn't. They just, because like I said, they're translated from a book of poetry, so there really isn't that structure. So to have this song that has a very kind of traditional, modern um, song structure, it just doesn't work. It kind of makes them feel like it's a new edition. So that's fun. And if there is anything good I can say about this adaptation, I will say the acting was pretty good. I was surprised. The entire cast really got into it in ways I never thought they were. However, I will say it does feel like there's kind of like a mixed message going around or something, where some of them are attempting to be cats, while some of them are attempting to be people playing cats. And that's a very big distinction. I'll say Ian McKellen is like the most convincing cat, and at times it did get a little disturbing, but I did enjoy him watching lap up that milk. Like I said, he was playing this role as if this is his very last role, that he will last chance to get another Academy Award, and I do feel bad. I hope he has another role coming up. I don't want this to be his last, but he really did give his all, and I have to applaud him for that, even if it did disturb me. Idris Elba did very well. I really enjoyed watching him play a villain. I just wish he wasn't a velvety cat for it. Francesca Hayward did a phenomenal job with what they gave her. While Victoria is not the most complex character, I always knew where the character stood and what she believed in part to Hayward's performance. I thoroughly enjoyed Laurie Davidson as Mr. Mistopheles. In this adaptation, they really changed Mistopheles, though. In the play, he's extremely quiet and aloof. He's a little cocky, but overall mysterious. He's like that tall, mysterious, dark guy that you can't help but, ooh, he's cool. That's Mr. Mistopheles. But rather, they made Mr. Mistopheles kind of very shy and very unsure of himself. I did enjoy this change because it kind of made us triumphant when he actually saves old Deuteronomy like a highlight of the story. It like actually felt like it was this big, tremendous moment. In the play, it just kind of was like, oh, old Deuteronomy got kidnapped. Good thing we have Mr. Mistopheles. He's gonna jump around and blow stuff up. And then, oh look, old Deuteronomy's back. Yay! Like in this, there was actually a moment where I was like, "Oh, are they gonna change the story up? And is he not gonna save old Deuteronomy?" So they had me tricked for a second. Should have known better, but I was still tricked for a minute. Dame Judi Dench did great. Let's be honest though, like, did we expect any less from her? Even in a role where she's playing a cat cult leader, the Marilyn Manson of cats. She did great. I mean, congrats to her. Once again, hope this isn't her last role. Taylor Swift did a good job, but like, the story ended up changing the role of her character so much from the original, it kind of felt pointless. There really wasn't that many changes, I would say, overall to the story, but they decided to make Bombalurina. Is that her name? I think so. I don't know. Uh, They decided to make her like the Harley Quinn to Idris Elba's Joker in this movie. She when I first heard she was gonna be in this, I actually thought she was gonna play Victoria. Glad she didn't. Then when I heard she was playing Bomba Ballerina, I thought they were gonna combine the character with Demeter and have maybe that scene where Demeter attacks Macavity be her, and then they have her come out, and she does this really weird, like sultry, kind of disgustingly sexual cat song about Macavity and how he's a bad cat and he's broken all the laws. And I still was thinking, even as she was drugging everyone, and having them go into a horny rage, that she was still gonna somehow take on that role of Demeter also and play some role in defeating Macavity. But I was wrong because she shows up, sings a song, shakes her cat boobs, drugs everyone, and then leaves. And we don't see her again for the rest of the movie. She is gone. I don't know where she went. It's never explained. It makes me wonder if, like, what does this mean for her in the future of this cat world? Are we gonna get a Cats 2 that explores what happens? I hope not, but I can't help but wonder. And related to that, kind of has to do with Jennifer Hudson, who I will congratulate. She really gave her all as Grisabella. But also, let's be real, Grisabella is barely in the story, film, and play. Yeah, she does a good job at memory, but she's not really an overly complicated character. She doesn't have much of an arc. We don't really get to know her. In the play, we don't know what her action or sin is that caused her to be kicked out of the Jellicle cult. The story here kind of adds that she went with Macavity, whatever that means. Because apparently he's the true enemy. Which makes me wonder, will Taylor Swift's character now be the new Grisabella, who then, like 20 years from now, will be washed up and gross and will have to sing a song about her memory or whatever, and then have someone pick her to be reborn? I don't know. I just don't get what Grisabella's plot was here, especially with that addition of her going with Macavity. I just don't know. After all of this, I guess, I can forgive a lot of this. Because, there's really, really, really only two characters in this film that I generally think are the most horrendous characters of all time and cannot be forgiven. And that is Jenny Anydots and Bustopher Jones. And hear me out. I don't dislike Rebel Wilson or James Corden. I think they're both fairly talented and fine. I do think they get caught a lot in kind of like doing these gimmicky roles and acts, and I don't really blame them. I do put a lot of that on society. We have ideas of what certain types are in both stage and movies. Like it's not uncommon for deaths for specifically overweight people in the industry to play buffoonish, silly, or sassy kind of side characters. It's it's very common. There's actually plenty of videos here on YouTube about actors and actresses talking about knowing your type when going to audition. And some of like the bigger ones talk about how they know that, as much as they would love to play a bigger role, that they know that their body type does limit them to playing kind of buffoonish, sassy side characters. It kind of feels like that's what's happening with Rebel Wilson and James Corden in this movie. And honestly, I was really hoping that going into this that they would play their characters a little more closer to the play. But no. No, no, no. Instead of having like a very sweet and earnest Jenny Anydots, we get like Fat Amy the cat. Rebel Wilson's role from like the 800 Pitch Perfect movies. That's kind of what we got. And look, dude, I don't blame her I It's definitely the director and the story. But there is one thing I did like. In the play, she kind of removes her coat at one point because she wears this coat that makes her look fat and older. She removes it to reveal she's actually skinny and small and young. And this is something I've always hated in the play. But here in the film, they decide not to do it. She still has this really horrifying scene where she like unzips her clothes or her skin, really, and reveals like a whole nother fur and skin underneath it, just wearing like this purple dance suit. In some ways, that's worse than what we got on the stage play, but at least like she didn't take it off and like lose like 50 pounds. And oddly enough, it reminds me of that scene from the 2004 adaptation of Phantom of the Opera, where Christine removes the Phantom's mask and wig to reveal a whole nother head of hair underneath the wig. Decisions were made. Anyways, this like isn't even me breaking down that whole nightmarish scene where she like eats a cockroach and stuff. Like that whole scene needs to be experienced. I'm just gonna say. Hooper also directed James Corden to be himself. And like I said, I don't hate him like James Corden. I think on his show, his personality is fine. But I didn't want to see that in Cats. It wasn't just James Corden playing himself, they also put him in a fat suit because you know what's funnier than fat people? Making fat people fatter. And then have them sing a song about how much of a fat cat they are. And I can't blame this all on Hooper because this is in the play, but it was like I saw seeing pictures from behind the scenes, and like James Corden is most definitely wearing a fat suit, and you're like, oh. And then because they had him act like very silly himself, it turns Buster for Jones song that I already don't really like a lot to like something even worse. So thanks. That was great. Now, here's where I'm going to say the best things I'm going to say about the movie. Now, if you really enjoy beautiful choreography, regardless if it's performed by people or humanoid cats, then this film will be enjoyable for you. I'm not gonna lie, I was generally captivated by the choreography. The way the dancers both mimic cat movements while also performing these elegant dancings is a highlight. I will say they get really weird, like there's scenes where cats come out wearing shoes and dancing, just shoes. Listen, I can accept Mr. Mistopheles wearing a magic suit. I can accept that. I can accept James Corden's character wearing a suit. I can accept old Deuteronomy wearing a fur jacket for some reason. What I can't accept, though, is when the cats come out wearing just shoes. Something about that just doesn't work here. But minus that, the dancing is still where the movie shines. And including of shining, this is where Francesca Hayward is stunning and shines the entire time. If you don't know this, Francesca Hayward is a famous ballet dancer. Like, and for a reason. Whenever she is doing her best in this movie, it's when she's dancing and reminding everyone that she is like the most talented dancer in that room. But then there's this weird thing where like the CGI sometimes ruins the dancing because it like gets in the way because it's not properly animated. As well as there's these awful shots and angles that just ruin some of those dancing sequences. It's almost as if Cooper didn't think people enjoyed the dancing and was like doing from these weird creative angles that does not showcase the dancing, or from like weird up angles or side angles or like weird close-ups of their faces. Like no one goes to Cats for the plot or the songs. They go for the dancing. And he really should have directed the cameramen to get really good shots of them dancing. Cooper, you've made some really weird decisions with this movie. Weirder than Les Mis. Overall, my feelings about Cats is pretty much my feelings towards the stage musical. It's not very good, and structurally it's very unsound, but it is enjoyable. And you know what? I won't shame anyone for liking it and for enjoying it. I'm gonna be honest, I did feel entertained watching that movie. Wouldn't say it was good, but I had a good time watching it. Kind of like in the way you have a good time going into a haunted house or watching a horror movie, like that kind of good time. Not like the good time you have when you like watch a good musical. You know, as far as source material goes, I will say this is a much fairer adaptation than Phantom of the Opera. But at least Phantom of the Opera film's adaptation still like had a plot, and like even if Gerard Butler can't sing, like at least the music's still good. Anyways, I'm gonna recommend that everyone go sees this movie before they take it out. I'm gonna be honest, you probably won't enjoy it, so don't come back here getting mad when you don't like it, but I think it's an experience we should all have. Because one day we're all gonna forget we watched this, but it's gonna be like this weird like collective fever dream where we'll sit there when we're 80 if we're around. We'll sit around when we're 80 and be like, wow, remember when like Rebel Wilson ate that cockroach? And we'll all be like, vaguely, but why?